Most people see a flower and think of a gift. I see them as antennas. To me, every petal carries a vibration, a hidden melody left behind by the last person who touched it. I've spent my life hearing the world's secrets in the form of music, and honestly, it was a noise I was tired of carrying. But then Aris walked in. He lives in a world of total physical silence, yet when his fingers brushed a lily in my shop, I didn't just hear a song, I heard a masterpiece. I was a man who could hear everything, but felt nothing. He was a man who could hear nothing, but felt everything. What happens when the only person who can truly hear your soul is the one man who has never heard a sound in his life?
My shop, the glass greenhouse, sat tucked between a skyscraper's glass ribs and a subway vent that breathed steam into the winter air. My name is Soren, and I deal in a currency most people don't believe in. To the world, I sell stems and petals, but to me, flowers are antennas. They catch the invisible frequencies of the human heart. Ever since I was a child, I've had a gift, though on the bad days it feels like a haunting. When a person touches a flower, they leave an emotional fingerprint behind. When I touch that same flower, it translates into a melody in my mind. I've heard the frantic staccato violins of a groom who is terrified he's making a mistake. I've heard the low, mournful cello of a woman buying roses for a grave she's visited every Sunday for 20 years. I lived my life in a constant, overlapping cacophony of other people's souls. It made me reclusive. I kept my head down, my ears covered by heavy headphones that played nothing just to muffle the world. I preferred the quiet of the plants. They didn't have songs. They just had a steady green hum that grounded me. Then came the Tuesday that changed the frequency of my life. The bell above the door gave its usual brassy chime, but the man who walked in didn't react to it. He was striking, not in a loud way, but in the way a statue is striking. He had dark, swept-back hair and eyes the color of a stormy Atlantic. He wore a heavy charcoal coat that looked expensive but well-worn. He didn't say a word. He simply walked to the bucket of white lilies and trailed his fingers over the petals. I reached out to assist him, and as my hand brushed the same lily he had just touched, I didn't hear a melody. I heard a symphony. It wasn't a single instrument. It was a soaring, complex arrangement of brass, strings, and a piano that hit notes I didn't know existed. It was huge. It was triumphant. It was devastatingly beautiful. I gasped, dropping the shears I was holding. The metal clattered on the tile floor. The man didn't flinch at the sound. He just looked at me, his expression curious and calm. He pointed to the lilies, then to himself, and made a graceful gesture with his hands, his thumb and fingers touching his chest, then moving outward. He was deaf. The irony hit me like a physical weight. Here was a man who lived in a world of absolute physical silence, yet his internal echo was the most magnificent piece of music I had ever heard in my life. While everyone else walked around humming simple, repetitive tunes of greed or fleeting joy, Aris was carrying a masterpiece in his marrow. I pulled out a notepad I kept on the counter. "White lilies?" I wrote. He nodded, a small, guarded smile touching his lips. He took the pen and wrote in a sharp, elegant script. "They are the only things that feel like they're shouting. My name is Aris." I wrapped the flowers in brown paper, my heart hammering against my ribs. Every time our fingers brushed during the transaction, a new movement of the symphony erupted in my head. A crescendo of French horns, a delicate trill of a flute. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and say, "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever heard." But how do you tell a man who has never heard a sound that his soul is a concerto? When he left, the shop felt hollow.
The hum of the plants felt like a buzzing fly compared to the music he'd left behind. I sat in the dark that night, the blue light of the New York skyline bleeding through the window, and I realized I couldn't go back to the way things were. I had spent my life hiding from the music of others, but I would spend the rest of it chasing his.
Over the next month, Aris became a ghost that haunted my afternoons. Every Tuesday at 4 p.m., he would arrive. We didn't speak with voices. We spoke with ink and hands. I started learning basic sign language, my fingers fumbling and clumsy, but he was patient. He taught me the sign for bloom. He taught me the sign for listen. But the music was getting louder, and it was changing. The more I got to know Aris, the more the symphony shifted from a grand, distant orchestral piece to something more intimate. It became a jazz piano, soulful, improvisational, and warm. I learned that Aris hadn't always been deaf. He had lost his hearing at 7 to a fever. He remembered the sound of rain. He remembered his mother's voice, but he had forgotten what it felt like to be heard. "People look at me and see a broken radio," he signed one afternoon, his eyes reflecting the amber glow of the sunset. "They shout at me like I'm far away, but I'm right here. I'm just in a different room." I wanted to bring him into my room. I wanted to bridge the gap between the music I heard and the silence he lived in. I began an obsession. I wasn't just a florist anymore. I was an engineer of the senses. I bought high-intensity LED strips and a frequency modulator. I spent my nights in the back of the shop, wired on caffeine and desperation. I discovered that if I translated the pitch of the melodies I heard into light waves, I could create a visual representation of a person's song. I worked until my eyes bled. I wanted to show Aris what he sounded like. The night I finished the light organ, the city was under a heavy blanket of fog. Aris came by after the shop was closed. I led him to the back room, which I had cleared of everything except a single massive glass vase filled with water and thousands of tiny fiber optic cables. I took a single white lily, the flower that first connected us, and I held it. I focused on the music I heard from him, the deep, resonant rhythm of his kindness, the sharp, high notes of his loneliness. I plugged the sensor into the flower. The room exploded. The lights didn't just flash, they danced. Deep violets pulsed at the base of the room, vibrating the floorboards. Shimmers of gold and electric blue streaked across the ceiling in time with the hidden piano in my head. It was a visual symphony. Aris stood in the center of it, his breath hitching. He reached out, his hand passing through a beam of red light that flickered with the beat of a drum only I could hear. He couldn't hear the music, but he could see the rhythm. He could feel the vibrations in his chest. He looked at me, tear tracks shining on his cheeks. "Is this me?" he signed, his hands trembling. "This is you," I signed back. "This is what the world sounds like when you walk through it." He stepped closer, the lights turning a soft, romantic pink as the melody in my head softened into a love song. For the first time, he didn't use a notepad. He didn't use sign language. He reached out and cupped my face with both hands. In that moment, the music stopped being an echo. It became a chorus, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't just listening to someone else's song. I was finally hearing my own, and it was perfectly in tune with his. The city didn't stop being loud, but the noise no longer bothered me. 6 months had passed since the night of the lights. Aris and I had turned the glass greenhouse into something the neighborhood had never seen. It was no longer just a flower shop. It was a sensory gallery. People came from all over New York to see the light songs. They would bring a flower from someone they loved,
and Aris and I would help them see the music they left behind. But the real story wasn't in the business. It was in the quiet moments between the two of us. We were sitting on the roof of our apartment building, the Empire State Building glowing like a needle of light in the distance. Aris was leaning against my shoulder, his eyes closed. He liked the feeling of the city's vibration, the low rumble of the subway beneath us, the hum of the air conditioners. I watched him, and I realized that I didn't need the gift anymore. I didn't need to touch a flower to know what he was feeling. I could see it in the way his shoulders relaxed. I could feel it in the steady beat of his heart against my arm. Suddenly, Aris sat up. He looked at me, his expression intense. He took my hand and placed it over his heart, then over his throat. He began to hum. It wasn't a musical sound in the traditional sense. It was a low, vibrating drone, a raw expression of effort. But to me, it was the most important sound in the world. He was trying to give me a piece of his silence. He was trying to let me hear him, not through my supernatural gift, but through his own physical body. I closed my eyes and stopped listening with my ears. I listened with my skin. I felt the vibration of his voice, the texture of his breath, the heat of his presence. And in that darkness, the echoes of the city finally faded away. The violins of the neighbors, the cellos of the strangers on the street, it all went quiet. There was only us. "I love you," Aris signed, his movements slow and deliberate so I wouldn't miss a single letter. "I hear you," I signed back, and for the first time I didn't mean the music. I meant him. We had built a life in the gap between sound and silence. We had proven that you don't need ears to listen, and you don't need a voice to be heard. As the sun began to rise over New York, turning the gray buildings into pillars of gold, I realized that the greatest symphony ever written wasn't one you could play on a stage. It was the one you wrote every day, choice by choice, with the person who finally taught you to stay still. Soren and Aris, the florist and the silent conductor. Two men who turned the noise of a city into a song only they could hear. Sometimes, the world is so loud we forget to listen to the things that actually matter. Soren found a symphony in the silence, and Aris found a light in the dark. If this story reminded you that there is beauty even in the quietest corners of your life, please subscribe to Gay Stories Chronicles. We're building a library of the heart, one echo at a time. What is a silent way someone has shown you they loved you without ever saying a word? Let's fill the comments with your stories.